It's earnings season, which means we just got a fresh batch of Xbox numbers. As they are required to do, Microsoft has just dropped its quarterly numbers, which means we get a fresh look at all of the financial data, Xbox data, Windows data, and a whole bunch more. But on this channel, we're going to be talking Xbox data. So let's not delay anything here, and let's dive right into the numbers and kind of dissect all of the information that Microsoft just released onto the internet. So first things first, the company is in exceptionally good position. So overall, at a super high level, they made $65.6 billion dues. That is $65.6 billion. That is an increase of 16% year over year. Just numbers that are hard to wrap your brain around. And of that, the number of dollars they were able to put into their bank was $24.7 billion going into the coffers, which is Microsoft isn't going anywhere. Thankfully, they will be able to pay their bills yet again for another quarter. Now, when it gets down into the things that probably most people on here really care about, which is more of like the Windows and the gaming side, Xbox actually seemed like it had an okay quarter, all things given. Now, keep in mind that this is from July, August, and September. Geez, man, my brain just completely shorted out there. It was for Q1, which is July, August, in September, which is whatever reason my brain was not working there. Anyways, so for that period, it looks like numbers were actually pretty decent, all things considered. So gaming revenue grew 43%, including 43% points of impact from Activision, basically meaning that they were flat, but then you just sprinkled on 43% growth because of Activision. So relatively flat speaking from there, but here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. So Xbox content and services revenue grew 61%, including 53% or 53 points of impact from Activision, basically meaning that they grew 8% with, if you backed out all of Activision stuff, Xbox actually grew its content and service revenue, which is, again, I will remind you, is what Xbox tells us to judge them on, by about 8%. And then you sprinkle on the Activision stuff, and hey, 61% growth is pretty significant there at the end of the day. And completely expected hardware revenue declined 29%. Microsoft/Xbox has not released any real hardware other than some vaporware controllers. And I don't mean vaporware not showing up, but like they have like a vapor line, and I think that's what they were releasing. Whatever. Other than their controllers for the most part, we would expect hardware revenue to decline. People aren't buying multiple Xbox Series X consoles. That's just not what people do at the end of the day. So those numbers start to paint a picture. However, once we get into, and these next couple quotes here are going to come from the earnings call. So after they release numbers, they have a phone call and they start to drop bits of information here. And so this comes from Satya Nadella. He said, "We set new records for monthly active users in the quarter as more players than ever play our games across devices on the Xbox platform. Game Pass," key here, also set a new Q1 record for total revenue and average revenue per subscriber. So what's interesting here is, while we think of, hey, Call of Duty Black Ops just launched last week or whatever, remember, there was a run-up period during Q1 of like, hey, it's going to be on day one. It's going to be day one. Sign up now. You'll get it on day one, sort of thing. So we can start to see that this past quarter, Game Pass revenue and usage is going up, which means that Call of Duty play is going to start to pay off, potentially. Now, it's a record revenue, but we don't know what that number is, right? It just means it's the best it's ever been, but by what percentage? And keep in mind that there's a $69 billion bill that came with acquiring this content. So just kind of keep that in mind and in perspective. Now here, moving on, he went on to say, and in gaming, revenue increased 43% and 44% constant currency, blah, 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 with 43%, 43 points from Activision. Results here is the important part. Results were ahead of expectations, driven by stronger than expected performance in both first and third party content as well as consoles. Xbox content and services revenue increased 61%, 53 points for Activision tie-in and all that good stuff. So the fact that this quarter actually went better than expected, I think is, again, like you got to read between the lines here that they're setting themselves up, at least it appears so, which we'll get to here in a second, setting themselves up to say like, look, Call of Duty, this Activision thing, it's starting to materialize. I think it's probably materializing slower than expected, at least from an outsider's perspective. But hey, that juggernaut of an investment is starting to get that flywheel of momentum and getting people into Game Pass, which is, again, what Microsoft wants people to pay attention to. Now, after the earnings call and everything else, this little bit of information came out from Activision. They said, look, Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Now, this is conveniently timed for earnings. That this is all related. They said, look, Black Ops 6, biggest title ever. Total players, number one. Total hours, total matches. Granted, they could be very much cherry picking data, but either way, they're promoting and says, look, this is the biggest 3-day Call of Duty opening weekend in history of Call of Duty. So again, we're seeing a lot of momentum through this call of Xbox and everything else saying like, look, like things are trending where we were hoping they would be. In fact, they were besting things. However, it's not all sunshine and roses on everything here. There is a little bit of cautionary tale in here. And so this is a little bit of a forward-looking statement, although it says, and in gaming, we expect revenue to decline. Keep in mind, we expect revenue to decline in the high single digits due to hardware. This is for the next quarter, meaning basically the quarter that we're in. We expect Xbox content and services revenue growth to be relatively flat. This kind of goes against some of the things we just heard. We're excited about the launch of Call of Duty, where we saw the most Game Pass subscriber adds we've ever seen since on launch day, and there were many things to consider here. So like it doesn't like. All of this gets a little confusing. Like Xbox is saying like, look, Call of Duty Black Ops, best weekend ever. We're seeing record signups and everything else is going on. You have to remember though, what they're comparing it against. This is, I think, critical for the comparison for you to understand. A year ago, which is the quarter they will be comparing it against, they were going to be comparing it against Call of Duty that was not in Game Pass, meaning somebody like myself was paying $60, $70, potentially $80 or more for the title. So when we look at the numbers next quarter, and you got to keep this in mind, we're going to be comparing it against a quarter where people were buying the full titles, not subscribing to Game Pass. That is a key differentiator here, which is very, very critical, and it's why you listen to this channel. And so here is sort of an explainer from the financial team. It says, there are two things about the launch that are different than the Call of Duty a year ago, where revenue was mostly recognized in the quarter of the purchase. First, the game is available on Game Pass. So for the players who bought Game Pass, the subscription revenue is recognized over time. Second, the game requires an online connection, basically meaning you got to have online connectivity, Xbox Live Gold, other things like that, or depending on what you are on the PlayStation side. I think you kind of got to pick this apart, but I think if they expect revenue to be flat, that is actually pretty significant, because that would mean that they had such a large growth in Game Pass subscribers that they believe that this is going to be a long-tailed adventure and it's going to pay off. So it's going to be, I think, flat at this point is actually pretty monumental for the Xbox and Game Pass future. Nothing will be known for sure until the quarter ends, until the numbers are out. But there was a lot of gut reaction that said, hey, flat growth? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, until you remember that, hey, we were paying 3 times the price of what Game Pass currently cost for the game last year. And then it's like, that kind of actually makes a bit more sense. So don't let flat growth or no growth or just even growth make it sound like this is bad. And actually, I would inverse that and say that actually seems pretty strong, because at least on Xbox side, right? And granted, you still have PlayStation side, which is paying full price. You still have the PC side, which is paying full price. But purely on the Xbox side, you could almost think is it like 3-to-1? We'll see. We will see. The numbers get muddied, and financial teams will do, especially a company the size of Microsoft, will tilt things the way that they need to be tilted to make them sound most optimistic. But overall, it seems like it was obviously a very good quarter for Microsoft. They will continue to survive. Xbox seems to finally have found a footing outside of just churning new hardware. Remember, there's new hardware coming online. There's the 3 SKUs, but they're really refreshes. There's the Xbox headset. But again, those aren't big ticket items that are going to drive a lot of revenue. And do not confuse revenue and margin. Margin is how much money you make. I mean, Microsoft could go make a whole bunch of revenue, but lose money. So just keep that in mind. And anyways, this is the financial Xbox side of stuff that I love. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.